How's it going, everyone? It is 6:10 on Monday evening, and that means it's time for this week's episode of Riding in Cars with Cards. This is the show on the Homeward Path Network, if you want to call it that. I mean, there's just Homeward Path in this, but this is the show where we talk about specific cards, specific decks, like format-specific things, history of Magic, that kind of thing. That's what we're here for. Homeward Path is more evergreen, more, basic skills regarding Magic, playing Magic on a budget, the financial side. This is about the cards themselves. So, what do we got this week? Well, I know last week I did Heartbeat Harvest, and it was in anticipation of doing an episode of Homeward Path on combo. Well, life took command and did not give me my regularly scheduled recording time, so I am going to be fixing that this week. We are going back into the car for Homeward Path as well, unless, I have a guest or something along those lines, but because the next episode is still going to be about combo decks, we're going to do another combo deck, and this time it's going to be out of the current standard format. So what combo decks exist in the current standard format? Well, there's like 3 if you count Nexus, and I refuse. Nexus is not a combo deck. Nexus is what you play when you hate people that, whatever. I'm about to get myself in trouble with my mouth again. Anyway, the 2 big ones in Standard are Bantscape Shift, and that's like the only big one, and then there's Temur Reclamation somewhere way down in the second tier. And because I don't want to spend money on Scape Shift and cards that are going to rotate, my combo deck is Temur Reclamation. There's a couple of reasons I like Temur Reclamation. One, you play this deck for 2 reasons. One, you like playing a control deck, because that's what it is first and foremost. It is a very capable blue-red control deck that gets to play a few green cards, namely Wilderness Reclamation and Growth Spiral. Those are the 2 big draws to green in this deck. Wilderness Reclamation, even if you're not using it for completely nefarious purposes, is a completely reasonable control card, because it gives you the old sort of Feast and Famine effect where you get to take 2 turns. You can play stuff on your turn, and then you get to untap your lands, and then you get to play stuff on your opponent's turn. It's not the same, but it is similar. And then, Niv-Mizzet Paran is a respectable control deck win condition when you're playing a bunch of instants and Wilderness Reclamation. I still say, to this day, I have never lost a single game of Standard where I got to untap with a Niv-Mizzet in play. Has not happened yet. Been playing with Niv-Mizzet since November of 2018, and I've never lost a game of Standard where I untapped with a Niv-Mizzet in play. That card is just kind of disgusting. Like, that's all there is to say. It's just a messed up Magic card. And getting to untap with it right away because we're playing Wilderness Reclamation, and getting to cast both Wilderness Reclamation and the Niv-Mizzet a turn early sometimes because we're playing Growth Spiral is just great. So what about the combo part? Well, there's the combo, which is getting enough lands in play plus Wilderness Reclamation to kind of double up on your mana at the end of your turn. Namely, the magic number is somewhere in the neighborhood of 24. The ideal situation is to get to 24 mana. However you have to do it. Because that gives you an explosion to your opponent's head for 20. How often do we do that? Not as often as you'd think. We don't, we're not all the way in on the combo to the point that we're playing a bunch of bad ramp spells in our otherwise control deck. And maybe this deck would be a little bit more popular if it did. I don't know. Like, there's a Guild Gates version that does play more ramp spells because Guild Gates, and you have to try to mitigate the tap land effect somehow. But the list that I'm playing is not the Guild Gates version. We're not playing Guild Summit. We're not playing Gates Ablaze, and we're not playing like Gate Colossus or Archway Angel. So there's no sense in going down that road. If we're not gonna play all the payoffs, we don't need to go down that road. But for the combo finish here, we're just playing Wilderness Reclamations and Expansion Explosions. 4 of each. That's the combo. But some of our other cards help make that combo easier to assemble. 1, because they help us find it, and 2, because they make it to where we don't need as big a one. Like, sometimes the combo, if you will, is to end-step Explosion for, 6 or 7, if you've got the mana, or, end-step Explosion for 4, Explosion for 5, untap Explosion for the rest of it. Go back to my turn, double tap at the end of my turn, kill you. It's a thing we can do. And then, the fact that we play such an effective control game sometimes makes it easier. A Niv Mizzet that chunks in for 5 or 6. Now, let's be real. If a Niv Mizzet lives to attack, you're probably getting about 7, 8 damage out of it. Because a lot of the removal, not all of the removal that'll kill it, but a lot of the removal that'll get a Niv off the board is going to trigger its ability to draw a card, and there's nothing that says you can't cast spells just to cast spells. Growth Spiral is still really strong with a Niv Mizzet in play. Opt is still really strong with a Niv Mizzet in play. So, that's what we're here for. So let's break down the deck. Again, it's a realistic Temur control deck, and it just, because of the fact that it's playing 4 copies of Wilderness Reclamation and 4 copies of Expansion Explosion, it has a combo finish. So, for starters, how are we winning the game outside of the combo? We have 2 copies of Niv Mizzet Paran and 1 copy of Hydroid Krasis. And there's a couple of reasons I went with the 1 Krasis. For one thing, it is really powerful when your hand starts to get low and you just Krasis for 5 or 6, draw a bunch of cards, and then untap your lands. With a big stupid creature in play. Now you've just drawn a bunch of cards and your lands are untapped, so you can fight the counter magic battle over it. You can protect it. That's a big deal. Especially in right now standard format where we're, seeing a lot of removal, but not not your typical style of removal. Not there's not a Doomblade style deck really going around in standard right now, but there are plenty of decks that are playing stuff like Teferi Time Raveler. There are decks that are playing stuff like, Vraska, Golgari Queen, Entrancing Melody, all these powerful cards that are specifically really good against Hydroid Krasis. And being able to resolve one and then immediately untap and protect it is still really strong. And it can help draw you to your actual combo finish while your opponent's worried about dying to your, 6/6/8/8, whatever, however big it is. Drawing a few cards, untapping, gaining a little bit of life, that's pretty valuable. Well, that's it for the win conditions outside of the combo. It's 2 copies of Niv, and I could do an entire episode on how good Niv is. I don't need to. I don't need to do that to y'all, but I could. I love that card. It's just the most powerful thing I've had in Standard to untap with, and Wilderness Reclamation lets us untap with it right away. That's the long and short of it. We're a deck full of instants and sorceries with Niv Mizzet, and a lot of them draw cards. So, and not for nothing, Niv Mizzet also makes it so you can run a smaller explosion out and kill your opponent. Because if you explosion your opponent for 10, and then you draw 10 cards, and then Niv triggers and they die. That's a thing. We get to do that thing. Failing that, we have other angles we can play. Our actual control deck stuff is like the entire rest of the deck. So we're playing 4 copies of Opt. And then I believe my split was 2 copies of Anticipate to help smooth things out in the early game. If you need action against an aggro deck, it digs 3 cards deep. It's an instant. You can cast it at the end of their turn too. Find your Flame Sweep to untap and clear the board. Or find a Lava Coil to kill a big dumb creature. It's really helpful. We should probably be playing Search for Escanta, but I don't have any, and I'm not investing in it before it rotates. That's just a personal decision. The best version of the deck would probably play a Search would probably play 2 Search for Escanta over 2 Anticipate. Full stop. It's just going to be better. It's more powerful with Wilderness Reclamation. It lets you play stuff, it lets you play like a Planeswalker or 2 in the main deck that you can just find. It's just really, really good. And it also invites the Nexus of Fate into the deck. You can play like a fun of Nexus to, if things happen right, you can just go off with that instead until you can find your Expansion Explosion. But, it's 2 copies of Anticipate and then 2 copies of Chemist's Insight as card draw, or more appropriately, card selection. Chemist's is a pure card draw spell, but the rest of them are just card selection spells. Opt is card advantage neutral. Anticipate is card advantage neutral. I like playing those 2 over playing like additional draw cards in the deck because of the prevalence of Narset, especially in sideboards against control decks. The ability to play Opt on their turn, Anticipate on your own in order to dig. Under a Narset, that's not nothing. It's pretty important, actually. So, I like having access to that. And then for, our ramp spells, if you will, we're playing 4 copies of Growth Spiral and 4 copies of Wilderness Reclamation because they're the entire reason we're playing green in this deck at all. That's the only reason we're playing green, is those 8 cards. 4 copies each, Growth Spiral, Wilderness Reclamation. We already know what Wilderness Reclamation does. Growth Spiral is a really effective way to utilize 2 extra mana because it can bring in a tapped Shockland so that you don't take an extra damage needing that mana for your next turn. It can just dig you a little deeper. It's a relevant spell you can cast to still draw cards under a Niv Mizzet. Like, draw 2 cards, put a land from your hand into play is really strong, especially when you also get to deal 2 damage. So, that's not nothing. That's a thing we get to do. And then Wilderness Reclamation is the heart and soul of the deck. It's the reason the deck exists. Doubling your mana is unfair. It's just all even when you're not using it for nefarious purposes, it feels pretty nefarious. So, but when we're talking about the rest of the deck, the actual control spells, we're a little bit different. So, I wanted to do this one similar to how I did the Blue-Black Terramander, where it's mostly pre-sideboarded for creatures, so that the sideboard package I'm playing is better against the decks I'm bad against. So we're playing 3 copies of Lava Coil, 3 copies of Flame Sweep. And I think that's all the actual removal is 6 removal spells. Flame Sweep serving as kind of a small board wipe, clearing the board of a bunch of tokens, or, it's less good against mono white than it is against mono red by a pretty substantial margin. The fact that it doesn't hit my flying creatures is nice, and the fact that it does hit my opponent's flying creatures is nice, because it means I can use it as an instant speed foil to a really dumb turn out of the Arclight Phoenix deck. They just go bananas, resolve a Finale of Promise, point a lightning strike upstairs, cast a Chart of Course, dump the 3rd Phoenix, bring back 3 Phoenixes, attack with 3 Phoenixes and a Goblin Electromancer, and then everything dies and I don't take any damage. And that's great. That's all there is to say there. That's just great. The tilt-inducing power of Flame Sweep is pretty high. And the fact that it doesn't open up my own Niv Mizzet to my opponent's lightning strikes is a huge deal. So, it's a powerhouse card. It just is. And then I decided to play a little bit more counter magic in this build than previously. I'm playing 6 counter spells in addition to all the rest of this. I'm playing 2 copies of Syncopate, 1 main deck Negate, and then 3 copies of Ionize. And I agonized over Ionize for a little while, whether I wanted it to be that or I wanted it to be something like Sinister Sabotage. And ultimately I opted for Ionize, and I have actually opted for Ionize a few times playing the deck. That's an MTG dad joke. Hashtag probably not going up on the Twitter today. Tired. But I agonized over Ionize for a while, and I opted in favor of Ionize because the 2 damage is often the difference. Like, if I can ionize and get in for 2, and then land a Nib Mizzet, get a couple of damage off of it before it dies, that means I only need to have 1 Wilderness Reclamation and 8 lands instead of 2. Because now I can just, I can run an explosion out for 4, untap, combo out for the second one, and kill you. Like, that's it. Game over. And failing that, like, it just chips away at a life total. It's also easier on the mana. It means I don't need to leave up as much blue, which makes some of our other cards a little bit more powerful. Cards like Opt, cards like Anticipate, cards like Chemist's Insight. It's easier to cast them when your blue mana is not otherwise tied up. I know the mana in Standard's really good right now, but mana-based considerations is something I always consider, unless I have a deck like Temur Energy where the mana is just basically perfect all the time. That's not necessarily the case with Temur Reclamation. Sometimes you just draw all your Stomping Grounds and Rootbound Crags, and having a counterspell you can play off of a Sulphur Falls in that situation is really valuable. And it being a hard counter for 3 mana is pretty strong. I went Syncopate over, something else like a Quench or, other forms of tempo counters for a couple of reasons. The fact that it counters the spell and then exiles it is relevant against a hard cast Arclight Phoenix. It's relevant against, decks that are trying to play out of their graveyard a little bit. Something like Sultai Dreadhorde, you can just Syncopate a Wild Growth Walker, and if you Syncopate the Wild Growth Walker, their Command the Dreadhorde's not nearly as powerful when it doesn't have an extra Wild Growth Walker to return. It's little advantages. Going forward, I probably play something like Quench or Essence Scatter in that slot, and just flip the numbers with Essence Scatter and Negate in the board. Like, play the second Negate. Maybe play 2 Negate, 1 Scatter in the board so that I can flip those numbers around depending on what I'm playing against. But right now, it's 2 Syncopate, 1 Negate, and then 26 lands. Notably, I'm only playing 2 Temples, and both of them are blue-red. Actually, I take that back. I'm playing 1 Temple of Mystery and 1 Temple of Epiphany. And then it's all 12 shock lands. What is it? All 12 shock lands, and I think I only had 3 Rootbound Crags, and then I think I cut the 4th Sulphur Falls in order to fit a basic mountain and a basic island in there, because I am paranoid about stuff like Field of Ruin and Assassin's Trophy. I want to have outs to that. I want to be able to search a land. And that's the main deck. That's my main deck for Temur Reclamation right now. We're playing a fairly lean control deck. We're playing extra lands largely because of Growth Spiral. If I were playing this as a regular standard deck with no Wilderness Reclamation, no Growth Spiral, and just like a blue-red control deck, I would probably trim a land because we have so much card selection. I've played 25 land decks that play a lot of lean card selection, stuff like Opt and Anticipate before, and it's been really successful, at least locally. But the 26th land is something I really wanted for Growth Spiral. It makes sure that we can get the requisite number of lands we need for the Reclamation combo. And when you're playing a card like Expansion Explosion, extra lands are rarely a bad thing, because eventually you get paid off for flooding by killing your opponent. So, pretty good. As for the sideboard, I'm kind of up in the air on the sideboard right now. I could play it straight and, play with the numbers a little bit, play like I was talking earlier, go double Essence Scatter, 1 Negate in the main, and then play like the 3rd Scatter and the 2nd and 3rd Negate in the board, and then play, an extra Lava Coil, maybe a couple of shocks, and then, play it straight with the removal base, and then play some extra counter magic in the board, and then have a couple of Planeswalkers. But I'm kind of goofing around with the sideboard right now because I'm not playing this deck like a ton. Like, I don't have it on Arena, so I don't get to play it against the best decks a lot. Notably, it's a very wild card intensive deck if you're trying to get into it, because you've got to get all of those lands, and that's just a pretty tall order when you're, on the free to play grind. So I don't play this deck on Arena, so I don't get to play it against the best decks a ton, and that means I end up playing largely against what I see here locally, and that's mostly either creature decks or decks that are going to sideboard like really heavily against what I do. So I'm contemplating a couple of different sideboard swerves, and one of them I tried out today, and I don't think I like it as much as I do the other one. So the one that I tried out today was playing 11 Planeswalkers in the sideboard, along with 4 copies of Bond of Flourishing. Look at your top 3, reveal a permanent, put it into your hand, gain 3 life. It's really powerful when you have a bunch of Planeswalkers, and then Wilderness Reclamation is a permanent, and then, of course, you want to hit land drops anyway. And it was kind of the idea I talked about when I did the Jeskai Control episode, where you can sort of curve out on a deck that's playing to respect the combo, where you can just jam like a Narset on 3, and then like a Tamiyo or like a Saheeli on 4, and then just go Sarkhan plus attack you for 8. You're dead on the board. Like the idea of boarding my control deck into something that can leave you dead on the board at the end of the turn, at the end of turn 5. Kind of this mid-rangey green, mid-rangey blue-red Planeswalkers deck that also has access to Growth Spiral, so we can just like jam a Sarkhan on turn 4. Felt like it was something that was going to be pretty strong, but I don't know that I like it a lot. The other sideboard swerve that I'm looking at really hard is to play the Simic, a package of the Simic Flash creatures in the sideboard. Most notably, Spectral Sailor is really good here because we have lots of lands. We can turn those lands into extra cards. And then, of course, Frilled Mystic is a hard counter to go alongside cards like Ionize. We would obviously want to board Flame Sweep out if we're boarding into this package anyway. So, the Brineborn going like 3 Spectral Sailor, 4 Brineborn Cutthroat, let's see, 3 Spectral Sailor, 4 Brineborn Cutthroat, 4 Frilled Mystic, 4 Nightpack Ambusher. That seems fine. And then you have like the Simic Flash deck to sideboard into, but you have actual removal in your main deck. So you're still not like bad against creatures. Or, there's the tried and true of boarding into stuff like Legion Warboss and Saheeli against these control decks that are going to try to take away the combo. There's a lot of different ways you can sideboard with this deck, and that's one of the beauties of it. Because it is a functional control deck and it has this combo finish it can play, like there's a lot of different ways to sideboard with it. And notably, if we're looking at the Simic Flash stuff after sideboarding, the interaction with Wilderness Reclamation is there, where we can jam the Reclamation and then untap on 4 and be representing a lot of different stuff. Like we could be representing Chemisters, Brineborn plus Spectral Sailor plus Opt to draw, to make a big Brineborn, or, any number of things. So the options are there, is basically the long and short of it. That, and there's a little itch in the back of my head that wants to play Temur Flash, because I'm a horrible human being that is in love with the Temur color combination. So it is what it is. But there you have it, everybody. That's Temur Reclamation for August the 26th of 2019. We're jamming it right now. I'm in the process of rebuilding my Modern deck. I waited to rebuild it until after we got the BNR announcement. That Modern deck is at Phoenix. It's a deck I've been playing for a while. I got to figure out what I'm doing with no Faithless Looting, but I think we'll figure it out. I think we got a chance. There's some stuff I've been doing on a budget anyway. My Thing in the Ices are on their way. I went ahead and burned a little bit of credit on them because it was just an investment that was going to be worthwhile. It's a card that's going to be good for a long time. And especially if the Modern format's going to slow down and get a little bit more fair, Thing in the Ice is going to be really powerful against the likes of Stoneforge Mystic and Batterskull. Like, bounce your boards really strong when your opponent's trying to 1-for-1 you. So, I don't know. There's going to be more on my thoughts on the modern ban list update when we do Homeward Path this week. But that's all I have for today. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas for future episodes of this show, leave them down there. And we'll catch you on it. I'm going to record Wednesday because I have to take Esther to a doctor's appointment in Nashville on Wednesday. So I'm going to be recording on the way home from that. So if you hear her talking in the background, no worries. It's just my daughter. She's going to talk. But that's all I have. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you Wednesday night. Probably, I will probably upload either Wednesday night or Thursday.